So nice to see you again. It's been a while. It's been actually exactly 2 years. It was February of 2020 when we had a program about the Native Sons of the Golden West. That was the last program in our speaker series until today. I'm so glad that you remembered and you're sticking with us, and we hope we can get back into the routine. And apropos of that, I should just mention the next month, mark your calendars for March the 12th, when our speaker will be Ron Cork, who is a docent at Rancho Wahome Adobe, and he will be speaking on Rancho Wahome and its cast of, how do you put it? Rancho Wahome and its cast of characters. Our speaker today, Dr. Sandra Bonura, is a retired education professor and a continual student of history. We're talking about our interest in history and how much there is you can learn about it and how much fun you can have with it too. She's been helped to provide people with interesting historical perspectives. Back in January of 2019, she spoke of her writings about Hawaiian history and about the connections between Hawaii and San Diego history. And she will give more details about that today in talking about her new book on San Diego's Forgotten Empire, The Legacy of John Diedrich Spreckels. So without further ado, I'm happy to introduce Sandra Bonura.
Oh, thanks everybody. Nice to see you. Hey, raise your hand if you've never heard the name John D Speckels before. You've never heard the name. Really? Well, I'm just a little impressed right now. Okay.
Yeah, I heard he was a very sweet guy.
Have you read the book? Yeah, the book, yes. I don't know how to answer that or respond to that. I will just say the book is very spicy. Spicy San Diego history. And Sandy Bonura doesn't sanitize history, I just report it in my way, so a lot of fun. Well, yes, the book came out in 2020, so that 2021 is a little misleading. It took the San Diego Book Award, and I'm so thrilled because I've written other books, but this one, I don't know who's buying it, but it's selling off the hook, especially abroad, and it's going into paperback in July of this year. So I'm like, who's buying the book? I'm just thrilled that this is like a little piece of, and these are the last of my books because now I'll be paperback. And you can have my author's price at $30, no tax, no shipping. Here, I'm just getting rid of them because they're going into paperback. So you don't need to. I'll love having these, but if you would want one, there it is.
Make sure they have the picture of the hotel on the paperback. That's what's selling it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have control over what goes on the book. I was like, oh, the
That's
hotel.
why it's a big seller, the picture on the cover.
Well, thanks a lot. I'm not insulted in any shape, wherefore. Could you go to the back row? I don't want to look at you anymore.
I'm not very sweet.
I don't know how to respond to that either. Is this your husband? I'm so sorry. Okay, let's see if I can get this to work. Now, I asked you in the beginning to raise your hand if you've never heard the name of Spreckels. You'd be surprised how many people have not, especially under 40. You're like, they don't even know Spreckels sugar. That does nothing. Anyways, in Coronado, they know the name Spreckels, right? We've got the Spreckels Pavilion. We've got the brand new, actually it's a few years old now, but it's the John D Speckels Center, which is great in Coronado. Unfortunately, we have the mansion where the hanging was, the Rebecca's house, so the Spreckels gets linked crazily to this. We have where the Land Spares is in Coronado, that's the Spreckels building he built. And then, of course, is his mansion down there, his home, that's now the Glorieta Bay Inn. So, Coronado, they're getting hip to the name Spreckels. On this side of the bridge, where you and I are, we don't have much. There's a little elementary school, and trust me when I say this, they don't even know who John D Speckels was. I met a teacher who worked 8 years there. Who? Well, I don't know who it's named after. It's just named our school. I'm like, really? Principal doesn't know either. Then we have the Spreckels Theater. Oh my gosh. Would you raise your hand if you've been in there? Oh, that's so wonderful. Well, it just sold this at the end of 2021 for $26.5 million, and we don't know what they're going to do with it, so I'm like so nervous. And we have, of course, what's the bottom one? And there's a picture of me with my boyfriend, John Speckels, which is a bust right outside the working pavilion. It's in a beehive that's still there today, people. I'm allergic to bees. I had to jump over one to get my photo taken with him. So, and his name is in the bushes. So even if you're walking by, you're a tourist, you only see this. You don't even see the name, which is really a shame. I'm dating myself now. When I was born in 1954, this is what my downtown looked like. Raise your hand if you know what feature that, see Del Cortez? I want to see who the locals are here. What feature did they have there that everyone remembers? Big windows, right there. Glass elevator. Woo! In San Diego, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. The arrow points to the John D Speckels building, which is still there today, but it's dwarfed amongst 2022 buildings. But there it was. How many of you would love to see San Diego get that again? Yeah. Absolutely. So people say to me, Sandy, how in the world did John D Speckels get so much money? Because he was a multi-millionaire. And here's the short answer, because we don't have time. Sugar. Hawaiian sugar money built San Diego and San Francisco partly. But in 1875, the United States under President Grant granted what they call the Reciprocity Treaty. Okay, Hawaii, King of Hawaii, King monarchy there, you bring all your sugar and coffee and rice in. We're not going to charge any taxes. You'll benefit from that. But we want some Pearl Harbor. And that's what we did. So, these Spreckels family were sugar refiners in San Francisco. The father, Klaus Spreckels, he fought it. Oh, he wrote letters to Grant, Washington, D.C., saying this is the worst thing that can happen with us. We're united protest against this reciprocity treaty. They'll make us poor. How are we going to get our refine our sugar? We got this good stuff coming in from Hawaii. When he lost, the Spreckels family were so smart. This is where they made history. They were on the same ship to Hawaii that the U.S. government was going to share the good news. It has passed. They jumped on the same ship. So before the news could get out to all the planters through all the islands, they had cash full of pockets. They bought all the plantations they could get their hand on and contracted for all their next year's crop. When they're going to make a lot of money, right? Because now they don't know that their crops are going to go duty-free to the United States where they could be making money themselves. The Spreckels went in there and just got all that. And by the end of that month, they had started to hear about it. They're going, what the heck did we do? And anyway, there's John D on the left. Handsome guy, blonde-haired, blue-eyed. The father was also blue-eyed. They're from Hanover, Germany, which was then Prussia. And these are some of the descriptors that we see being attributed to them during those times. Again, no time for a history lesson, but let's do some bullets. So 1970, 1878, the Reciprocity Treaty was what year?
75.
1876 was the Reciprocity Treaty. By 1878, really only 11 months between they started doing all the buying, Spreckels family owned 40,000 acres of Hawaiian royal lands. Lands that never left the Kamehameha and the Kalakaua lines. I mean, this is royal. You just don't buy it. Spreckels got a little toehold in there. By 1883, he had bought the world's largest and built the world's largest plantation called Spreckelsville in Maui, shipping all those crops straight to his refinery, plus all the others he contracted with from the other islands. So all this is going to San Francisco. 1884, he had a veritable sugar empire. 1885, the king himself was in debt to Spreckels because he liked to party, the king. King liked to whip the bed, king liked to gamble, king built a palace, and the people are going, you know, what are you doing? He was called the Merry Monarch, and so Speckels actually bailed him out, which put the kingdom, the government, in debt to Spreckels, which is a good place. And now our Spreckels family, Klaus Spreckels, was the sugar king. Now, anybody here going to a job because your parents wanted you to go into a job, not one you chose? Don't need to raise your hand. John D Speckels, he didn't pick sugar. Sugar was picked for him. So, he said, okay, Dad, we got the crops. We got the refinery. Why are we paying someone else to ship them? Let me start a shipping business. And what will they have there is vertical integration. They have a monopoly. And this is the days before our government got involved in shutting down those monopolies. And John D loved shipping. Didn't like sugar, never wanted to be a part of sugar. He loved to yacht, he loved his yacht, he loved everything about it. He starts this shipping company, and not just any company to ship sugar in the hold. He made it luxurious. Tiffany windows, fine china. Now people for the first time are leaving America, right? In the middle of going to, you see it there? Honolulu, New Zealand. This is the width and breadth of that shipping company. Now look at that, you're 26 years old, 1879. By 1890, our guy has 7 steamships and a U.S. contract to deliver mail. He was a good German. He was always on time. The U.S. government said, man, this guy can keep his schedule. He can carry our U.S. mail, which is now more money for John D. And he's like making a name for himself now in maritime history. People are like, this guy, who is this young kid? He owns a shipping company and he's supervising the ships being made. And there's whole stories about that in the book. They're kind of cool. Do I wiggle this to get the color back?
Okay. Oh, no.
Okay. Now I know where it is, so I'm good. I'm autonomous. Okay. 1890. Uh-oh. Things went wrong with the reciprocity treaty, right? That was the first. We just got our toe in there. Now we want our whole foot in Hawaii. Long story short, American sugar planters, not the Spreckels family.
That just got worse.
Yeah, the descendants of missionaries, right? They're running the islands. They were born in Hawaii because they're the descendants. But they're part of the government. They're the wealthy element in Honolulu and the islands. Poor Hawaiians, they never had a chance. So in 1890, a group of these people kicked. King Kalakau had died, right? Queen Liliuokalani, his sister, rose to the throne. She didn't get to rule but for 2 years because anyway, it was a coup d'etat. It was no revolution. You ever hear there's a Hawaiian revolution? No. They just stole the island, overthrew her. John D Speckels, he had already had a good relationship with the Queen. Little secret is John D Speckels was quite the musician. He played piano and organ, and his new young wife Lily, she sang, and the Queen was a proficient composer and just a musical genius. They had already met, so he was funding her on the side. She made 8 trips to the United States. Give me my kingdom back. What are you doing? She never believed that the American government would go along with what these missionary Americans like this, they never lived here. But they, she could never believe that America could do that to her. But anyway, it was the Spreckels family. In fact, John D Speckels had, so there was the same, he went when she was going to try and get back her kingdom by force, they sent rifles and weapons on one of his oceanic ships. Anyway, they were royalists, the Spreckels family, very loyal. They tried to get the planters to back down. They said, get out of here, you screwed us over in the reciprocity treaty. Bye-bye you, bye-bye queen. Back to San Francisco, because before that, the Spreckels family had a death threat on their home in Honolulu, which they kept. They always lived in San Francisco. They had a Honolulu mansion. And that death threat scared the Spreckels really to death. And they got out of there, leaving, they didn't leave their holdings in Hawaii. They left people in charge of it. So this is Market Street in San Francisco. And see that building I pulled out of context? See it over there in its context? Anyway, you think of the Hotel Del. Feminine, wooden, Victorian, built by the Reed brothers. The Reed brothers also built this. So quite versatile these brothers from Illinois were. So John D Speckels buys the Call newspaper in San Francisco. He wants to control the narrative. He's pretty much a conservative. He doesn't like what's going on in this wild, wild west. And he doesn't like the way it's going. So he gets the Call, and then we have that famous shooting. The reason, where it says San Francisco Chronicle? John and his brother, because the San Francisco Chronicle had published, real juicy in the book, he published some stuff saying, your dad is a pimp for the king, he's getting prostitutes from San Francisco, no one could prove that, blah, blah, blah. Adolf, and they published that in the San Francisco Chronicle. Adolf goes over there and shoots him 3 times. In his office, didn't kill him, because apparently Michael DeYoung was carrying some books home, and the last bullet went through the book and not his heart. That's the only reason. Adolf Spreckels was off from temporary insanity. It seems like you could do anything in San Francisco in those days. Here's our John D's family.
Was that building destroyed in the earthquake by any chance?
Very good question, and I'm going to show you a slide of it, which will answer your question. Yes, ma'am.
So Spreckels tried to shoot somebody?
His brother did. Yes. How dare you insult our family? Boom, boom, boom. Shot and killed Michael DeYoung.
He killed him.
Shot and severely wounded Michael DeYoung. His brother Charles DeYoung was already murdered by doing slanderous things from another person.
So they were slanderizing the Spreckels
Spreckels.
family,
Yes.
saying things that could be proven, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Saying that, things that they did that was very touchy. And things that they said, how dare you? About his business and by saying what they was doing with the king. This is their home in San Francisco. This is Pacific Heights. This is John D's mansion. There's his beautiful little children. I really think the success of this book was because I was able to find so many descendants. Every line there of John D's children, now their grandchildren, great-grandchildren, contribute to this book. So there's almost 50 photos, never before seen, artifacts. This is stories. So it's really nice that the family has a book now. This is how John D lived in San Francisco. You see, remember, he was shipping, he went all over the world. So he picked up things. So the house looks like a museum. Does anybody know the name of that very rare wood in Koa? I just gave it to you.
Yeah.
Koa is so rare so they love Koa, the family. So all that ceiling is pure Koa wood. Can you imagine that? Millions and millions of dollars even then. John D loved shipping. I've told you that. He could go to Hawaii with his young family on any one of his steamships, 2 weeks luxury. 8 days luxury. But instead he liked to take his family, his children, on his personal yacht. And one of the stories that I remember that's also in the book, his little daughter Lily is on the right there holding binoculars. Because remember, that's how you used to have to, there was no computers on ships. It was like, look for stuff, look for stuff. Anyways, she said her dad, they were going to go off from San Francisco to Honolulu on a visit, and he brought a milk cow on board to feed all the children. What a great idea, they're gonna have fresh milk the whole 2 weeks. Wasn't long before the kids are up there with Bessie. Ship goes up and away, cow goes over, sharks move in, and the kids were like, I'll never drink milk again. You know, so those are the cute stories, you know. This is what John D says about finding San Diego. He likens himself to Columbus, doesn't he? Can you read that? He's 34, discovers San Diego on one of his yachting trips. A larder would be like what we call a little mini fridge, you know, to store for provisions. He saw our bay and went, whoa, this place is sweet. And of course, in that era, ladies and gentlemen, the Spreckels name is famous. Well, west of the Rocky Mountains anyways at that time, and the Pacific. But when he arrived at our dock at the end of Market Street down there, our leading citizen said, the Sugar Prince is here, get him. San Diego was in a boom. People were investing here. They're investing here, Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino, Los Angeles. The train had moved in. The real estate was going like crazy. This was the place to build in. And they said, but you know what? Our train is moving out of San Diego. We were like lost down here. We were connected to nothing. There weren't cars to get you out of here to go get the Transcontinental Railway. We were stuck. You get on a horse to go, you know, and so it was really difficult. So with the train leaving, this place would have just become back a desert. So when John D came, they wined and dined him. And he says, they begged me to get into the game of making San Diego. And this is how they begged him. Look, the train's leaving. What does trains need in those days to run?
Right.
How are you going to get coal? Yeah, that was our problem. The train said, we're tired of you, San Diego. We need coal and you can't give it to us because there was no place. We weren't getting coal that needed to be dredged, blah, 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 blah. So John D built this huge coal wharf. He could be living in San Francisco. And pretty soon, 600 men are working down there. Not bad. You see where it says Spreckels Brothers? This is the end of Market Street. Down here, and so that thing paid off right from the beginning. So the train said, we will stay. Now we have coal. So John D was sort of a savior for the city in those days. Oh, let me tell you a little John D story so you get a sense of he's like his dad. Okay, see those little skinny piers? Well, not everyone liked he was coming in and building his big pier. There was a lot of people working and living in San Diego that were doing their own little business off their little tiny piers, and what was their livelihood? Who's this upstart from San Francisco coming over and taking over our business? They got a legal injunction to stop him from building that pier. Well, he was undeterred. He hired 2 full crews. As soon as the first crew was put into a San Diego jail, the second crew picked up where the first one left off. When the second crew was jailed, the first crew, bailed out with Spreckels' money, returned to the job until it was just worn out. You just didn't say no to Mr. Spreckels, did you? And we're kind of glad, aren't we? Anyways, when he came here, remember we had to fill his larder, it was an accident, he already knew a guy named Babcock. Raise your hand if you heard the name Babcock in San Diego. If you lived in Coronado, you'd know that name, right? Right now you go to Babcock and Story Emporium at the Hotel Del. So Babcock is a pretty big name. He said, Mr. Spreckels, you've got to see this island we're developing. We're calling it Coronado. We have a vision. We are going to establish the grandest hotel on the Pacific coast. And they pooled their money, they got some loans, and they purchased the entire island for $110,000. Does anybody know the name of that man with the hat, not with an arrow, with a white beard? Famous San Diego man?
Alonzo Horton.
Yeah, who said that? You're a good man.
Let's not get too carried away.
Alonzo Horton, father Horton. Who moved everybody from Old Town to downtown to develop the gas lab? Okay, so this is an original auction picture, folks, okay? So, things were get into Coronado. That Levi Chase was San Diego's first lawyer. He bought this lot for $1,600 by lunch. Oh, in the morning, by lunch, he was offered $3,500 from other desperate people. So this is how fast and furious people want to get into the island of Coronado and build there. And these were the terms. And by the end of that public auction, which I think is amazing, they made $110,000, which is the exact amount that they spent. I mean, didn't the signs look good? Looked like God was smiling on this every which way. But remember that boom I told you about? It went bust. Not just yet, sorry. It's going bust though. That's a news flash, right? So this is a hotel being built, as well as the lots around it. People are buying the lots. Can someone guess how long it took to build the Hotel del Coronado?
11 months.
How'd you know that?
I remember in a lecture hearing it.
11 months. Isn't that phenomenal? The Chinese who had been building all the stations down coast of, California's the Southern Pacific moved in. When they got to San Diego, the Chinese were like, what are we building now? Oh, there's only Mexico left. So they were around to build the hotel. And in 1888, the Queen of the Beach opened. Big news across the country. I tell you, there were dignitaries here. But then, what goes up must come down. And this axiom was never true when that great land boom collapsed in the early months of 1888. The Hotel Del wasn't finished. It was really kind of a facade. They had no, I'll show you this next slide. This is an actual slide of San Diegans leaving San Diego. Right? Here's what John D said about them. They scurried off like rats from a sinking ship. Everybody who could get out, got out. Only the brave men full of grit hung on. So there was nothing. People who had bought those lots in Coronado, they would sell them to you for a quarter. They'd sell them to you for a cup of coffee. They wanted out. There was no water here. There was no, now everything's boom. And not just San Diego, Riverside, San Bernardino, all those places were just suffering. Hotels that were being built, thank goodness the Hotel Del had John D around, because they were torn down for lumber. I mean, you wanted every penny. This was a very severe financial devastation. So here they go, they got out of there. But guess who that boom did not, that bust did not affect? Our man, who had lots of money. He was not impacted by it, right? He had all this money in San Francisco. And Babcock said, please lend me $100,000, please, so I can finish the hotel. And by the way, Hampton's story, he wants out. Hampton's was the partners. And he says, so he's yes, I'll lend you $100,000. I love this. This place is gorgeous, San Diego. And I will buy out Hampton Story's interests. And then the little investors around San Diego, they wanted out too. They didn't trust this place was going to go anywhere. And John D started pouring his money wherever was needed, because there's something he said, this town captured my heart and my fantasy. And he says, this is my time. Because he got lots of criticism from his father, right? His father's going, what are you doing? No one's heard of San Diego. Why are you pouring your money down there, son? Your job's here in San Francisco, and blah, blah, blah. You don't need to stay out. He says, you know what? I get a reward for the very activity. Oh, well, it's going bankrupt. I build for the future. And that's Mr. Babcock. He never could pay John D back that money. So John D then owned everything. And Babcock, because it was his dream, right, to build a hotel, he became the manager. And then, of course, stuff happened. They went to court. Oh, yeah. There's some juicy stuff in this book. There's all kinds of court cases building this darn city. So there's Mr. Babcock at his old age young man. And where's Vincent? Vincent C.H.G. Fenton's tribute down there. when Babcock and his wife, who lost all 3 sons to death, so now they're older, like you know, us, and they have nothing, Henry Fenton paid everything for them until they died.
Henry Fenton, oh.
Just out of benevolence. Okay, so JD said, San Diego got me. I'm just in it to win it. But I'm thinking this city was probably a little bit of distraction for a man whose family was crumbling behind the scenes. Supreme Court cases were decided, right? There's lawsuits going on. And in my chapter, I call it sugar and strife. The sons are suing each other. The sons are suing the father's suing the sons. It is pandemonium with this group. And the only girl is going on the side of her younger brothers. Oh, it's a mess. So I think San Diego was a good distraction. Yes?
Another thing we should remember also is that whatever dollars, numbers that we see on the screen and that you brought up, multiply it by 100
That's a
to
good
put
point.
it in today's
That's a good point. Yes, and I constantly do that in my books. Thank you for bringing that up, because I went, okay, the San Diego Railroad cost $12 million. What is that today? So, you're right. Well, folks, this is the city that took its distraction. May I present John D Speckels' first view of San Diego, or Sin Diego, as they call it. Remember, Wyatt Earp was down here. Okay, so downtown San Diego evolved outside the law. Shanties, saloons, prostitution, opium, and everything that comes with them, police and raids. There's the prostitutes being led away down the bottom right down there. And they just came back after they were bailed out by the madams. So San Diego was pretty much of a mess. Father Horton had moved everybody down there. And I guess it just never kind of recouped them. It was awful. And remember, we had no way of getting around San Diego. There weren't really any buses. There's some itty bitty little streetcars, you know, with horse driven. They go nowhere. If you lived in San Diego, you lived around here, because there was nowhere else to go unless you wanted to, you know, grab a mule and go there. So this is what we had. People were saying to him, Mr. Spreckels, we see you're investing in San Diego. Wouldn't you like to build a better community? Why don't you start raising this nice and go, oh, I can't do with this. Because in his mind, he was imagining this. He wanted a nice, neat, orderly, modern look. He was not interested in touching this. He wanted a blank slate. Again, he said, San Diego, this is kind of my hobby. This is my thing. I want it to be beautiful. But before anybody could build, we had to get an infrastructure. That's critical. And San Diego had, not a very good one, because we were always hurting for money down here. And he said, San Diego would never grow, my dreams would never be anything unless I secured water and transportation. The two big things. Without those two, you can't grow a city. So, the most important was water for San Diego. There are stories, you'll read them in the book as well. In San Diego, in those early days, people would drink beer to save their water. We had no water. San Diego's water was, that was challenging to research how we got our water. And some of you are old enough, if you're hung around here, those flume systems, people go on Sundays and they'd ride the water flumes, those wooden things that carried water. But it was a mess. And John D had an engineering background. He went back to Germany when he was a young man to learn all. That's why he got so good with building things, with his background. Anyway, you recognize those dams? Otay, Barron, Marina? Thank you, John D. Thank you. And by 1912, he gave the water company, and became our municipal water company. His water became San Diego's water. He gets no credit for that today, by the way. And then look at the poor old horse down there. I don't think anybody was happier to see John D than those horses. Put us to pasture, please. So there were some of the little ones that were going into bankrupt. He just got them all out of receivership, and He's, in his words, so I set to work to build a street railway system which could reach out to even the outlying sections of the city, and thus we have today the museum, the San Diego Electric Railway System. And look at this. Now, we don't need to live near San Diego down there. Look where the streetcars are taking us. Now we can develop some suburbs. And I just want to remind some of you, did anybody here grow up in San Diego? Me, you? 4 of us? All right. High five, high five, high five. But still today, and I'm embarrassed to say this, because I grew up here, I'm named Sandy after San Diego, for crying out loud. See the San Diego Electric Railway Association? It operates, today it's still standing in National City, and it operates the historic National City Depot, where you can see there's me with one of the guys there, looking at one of John D's railway systems, and he says, no one comes here. I'm so sad. I spent a Saturday touring around, and I said, how many people come here? He says, no one's really interested in us anymore. I went, that's sad. So it stays open. I think we all should get down there and have a field trip. Remember he bought the call in San Francisco? Now he bought the San Diego Union. This is when he's still living in San Francisco, people. And then the Evening Tribune started criticizing him. He says, well, we'll buy that too. We'll shut up. So now we have the San Diego Union Tribune. Mission Cliff Gardens, which I just toured 2 weeks ago. See that circle right there? It's still there. Have you guys gone over there? It's called University Heights. Take a field trip. If you guys tomorrow, any of those, you want a Sunday drive, go down there to where Mission Cliffs Garden is. I wrote they were doing historical markers. They got a grant for it, the Historical Society, so I helped write the copy. So I go, is it still there? You can still see it. And there's houses built from the Pan Am Exposition all around it still today. Fun trip, you guys. Anyways, San Diego didn't have a park. There was no park here. But he said, people need a park. So he built Japanese gardens, there was a gazebo, there was.
What's the big building in the background?
San Diego First Normal School. San Diego State, before I moved here, that is the First Normal School. So, yeah, no. But you can still see, because the San Diego Unified School District has buildings there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that became the education center for the San Diego Unified School District. But before that, the building for the normal school was Alice Burney Elementary.
Was it now?
Yeah, before they built the other one off to the side. And then San Diego Unified moved in with their education center.
We got a historian right here. What's your name?
Spence Milne.
Spence Milne?
Milne, M-I-L-N-E.
Spence Milne, the historian. Got my eyes on you.
No, the survivor. No, my family and I came here 75 years ago.
I love it. Love it. Fantastic. Oh, you need to start talking in the microphone, doing oral history. So, when he built this, John D's critics, and believe me, every rich man has a critic, right? You just built that park because you want people to ride your streetcars and get money. That's all we care. Well, you know what? Even his critics now had a place to eat his chicken sandwich on a Sunday and listen to music in the bandstand, right? This is the thing that I'm most happy about. Now, when Father Horton picked up and moved everyone down to Newtown, which is downtown, this went to awful, just awful, refreshing. But John D decided that he was going to restore. Now, when I grew up, it was Ramona's marriage place here. Now, today, it's restored back to La Casa Estudio, which is historically accurate. But John D refurbished that in Old Town. By the way, the first American flag in California was raised in the Plaza of Old Town. Why don't they have a big sign about that? That's pretty huge.
because it was the Mormon battalion that raised it.
And why isn't, but, so we don't like Mormons, so we're not gonna, is that the sentiment?
That's it.
Shame on us. And anyway, so he could have hired anybody, but he was progressive and did a woman. Today, our people who are students of architecture, they make pilgrimages to San Diego, to Old Town, specifically to see this because it's the oldest surviving example of Spanish architecture, and it's just beautiful. Now, there is a plaque to John D in the middle of this, but I mean, he doesn't get credit anywhere is what I'm trying to say to you guys, anywhere for his point. When he started doing this, then other of our capital investors saying, you know what, I'll get the Cosmopolitan Hotel. So they followed suit. So they followed him to, or the place would have been raised, and we'd have another suburb right there, people. Hotel Del became his retreat for him and his family. His wonderful little stories. The kids all remember coming down here for their holidays. These are his children growing up in the courtyard of the Hotel Del. You got your eyes on this character right here? This is John D Speckels Jr., the heir apparent. He built Tent City in 1900 because he wanted to have some fun things for people. Because if you lived in El Cajon, if you lived in Lakeside, you were hot. Now you can go down here and stay for a fraction. You can't afford the Hotel Del, but you can afford this. He never made a dime on Tent City. And his family have great stories about their times here. You guys have heard a lot about Tent City, I'm sure. Now, here's the pivotal moment. In 1906, he was 54, and I'm telling you, he was near death. He was a Republican and a delegate, so the papers were saying, John D Speckels is not going to the convention, he's dying. His daughter Grace who was in Europe, come home, your dad's dying. This is how grave he was. And no one really knows what it was. But he was 175, went down to less than 100, and they were force feeding him. Okay, I had no idea what that was. So this is what happened in 1906 when he was at his worst. Anybody from San Francisco up here? Are you?
I grew up there.
Did you grow up there?
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
I was out kind of in the southwest. Well, there were a couple places. So Pacific Heights is one area, and then the southwest area.
Oh, yeah, the Pacific Heights area. Wow. You got some money.
Yeah, apartments.
That's pretty cool. So this happened. Actually, blessedly, he had a steamship that happened to be in the harbor. He was carried to his steamship, right? And with a lot of other evacuees, taken down here to San Diego, and then he returned the ship full of things from San Diegans, citrus fruits, blankets. We all got, because you know this is the first natural history in our country at this time, the first. I mean, oh my gosh, the city was gone, and when you were there, you didn't know what else was gone, and there was lots of stories. So you asked, what happened to the Call building? Remember that iconic? That was John D's building up there. It was iconic from the moment it was built by the Reed brothers, who also built the checking people out. Up on top there was one of the first in the country's restaurants. It was on the very top floor. And it was called Camille's Rotisserie. Anyways, it was so well built by the Reed brothers that it survived the earthquake. One of the only buildings in San Francisco Market Street. But then the fires happened, right? Because then there's whole stories about that. Woo, that's some stuff. Fire whooshed through there. And today, I should have a slide of what it looks like today. The top is all cut off and it's just a boring old building. So, and down there below, that little picture, that's let me see.
But it's still standing.
It is. It is. It's unbelievable.
What's in it now?
It's an office building. See this guy right here? That's his father trying to get his safe out. And descendants, his grandson, great-grandson or grandson? Great-grandson, gave me a stack of original photos from the San Francisco earthquake. And I'm like, don't you want to get these to somewhere? No. Are you sure? No, they got plenty. Okay. But remember, he owned the Call newspaper. So the photographer for the Call newspaper was going around taking pictures of all the Spreckels holdings, the Spreckels family members, and the rubble. It's quite fascinating. Not John D, because he's down at the Hotel Del. Thank you very much. But there they are. All the families went to their vaults. Right? When you do that, you had, yeah, let's go get our money. He came down to San Diego. He's a refugee now. And something inexplicable happened when he was here. He got well. So well, people said, was he being poisoned in San Francisco? I mean, who was poisoning him? I don't know. But I mean, it's kind of odd. Now some say maybe it's the weather. Okay. Maybe it's just having a purpose. I gotta get better. My family, we have no more holdings in San Francisco. We have nothing. But once he was here, he wasn't going to go back to San Francisco. And he built, here's the Hotel Del, right? This is his house. That's his house. That's the Glorieta. That's the John D Speckels mansion on Glorieta Bay, right there. He could keep the Zionist yacht, which he parked right here, and his other eye his business. And he had a tunnel that built right here. So he could go under the street to the Hotel Del. Got shaved, saw his doctor.
Apropos weather, as far as
Yes.
John D's condition is concerned,
Yes.
Mark Twain said the coldest winter I ever spent was July in San Francisco.
Had you heard that?
Oh,
Yeah. That's awesome. And today, has anybody ever been here to the Glorieta Bay Inn? 2 people? They have a new bar that they opened up, so you can go there and have a glass of wine in the music room. And you can see pictures of John D on the walls, and please go there. It's real nice.
Is the tunnel still there?
No. Well, I mean, it's still there, but it's like blocked off. You know the Hotel Del just went through this big renovation? The tunnels were illuminated once again. So he loved Coronado. It's his home. Most of his children stayed up there in San Francisco because they now had their families, but his youngest son came down here, and then soon his younger daughter after she got divorced. So his grandkids, remember the mansion where the hanging was? He'd given that to his youngest son Klaus for their family. And he started building up Coronado. Right there you can see, that's the Lions players in this building. Right?
That's a little park that's still there, right?
Yes, do you know the name of, who knows the name of this?
Sorry?
Why right? Star Park. Star Circle. Star Park. I don't live there. And that's at Frank Baumhaus where they say he wrote, you know.
Oh, yes.
It's all about. And that's the library still standing today, Coronado that he gave. He widened and paved the roads. He gifted a library. But then new council members began a nasty campaign against him. And there's a lot of stuff in the book how hurt he was. Okay, you guys are incorporated. You should have been paying for all this out of your taxes. I own the Del. But I am paying for the street paving. I'm paying for the planting of all these trees, the watering, the trimming, all the public spots. And now you're starting to campaign against me? He was so hurt, so wounded, that he began publishing letters to the people of Coronado. And that's the only time we get to see him because John D Speckels made no announcements. He was never out anywhere. He wasn't a society guy. He's the most private, quiet man. And he owned San Francisco newspaper. He owned both newspapers in San Diego. He controlled his narrative. He was private. You talk about him, you'll hear from his lawyer. That's why there's never been a book until now, I feel. I've never seen such sanitized history in my life. Private, and so's a family. Very private. Very careful. Anyways, here he is. This is him and 5 of his grandchildren. See that little girl on Opa's face right there? Now I'm a grandma. You can't get kids to just do that. That that little expression, she's very comfortable there. Little Harriet, you can tell, loved her grandpa, and they all loved him. And that swing, there's me, just recently pointing, I'm at the Glorieta Band, pointing up. To this day, the hooks are still in the ceiling. Today, which that swing was on, they're very proud of those hooks. So go see that when you're there. So, now he starts building our city. Here's it's coming, see the street down there in the middle? It's, do you know what street it is today? I heard it, what is it? Broadway. You know what it was before? D Street. He named it Broadway. I'm not having my balloons on D Street, that's boring. Broadway. Da, 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 da. So all, here there's Coronado now, he owned the whole island, he owned the ferries that came over, he owned every single lot on the south side of Broadway. And he began building in the Chicago style of architecture. Neat, orderly, nothing garish, everything classy. As we know, that's the, my grandmother lived in a boarding house across the street from this, so I remember as a little girl looking out the window, directly across. So that's the, I get sad showing it to you because who knows what's going to happen. The reason it's as exactly as it was from the early 1900s is because Jacqueline Littlefield bought it and revered it and kept it. Will you read the screen? I gotta talk this one. This beautiful hotel that was built for the Pan Am exposition that was coming. And it was on Soho's designated list, but it was mowed down anyway. Same architect, Harrison Albright, that built this one, built another hotel, still standing today in Broadway. It's just like it.
U.S. Grant?
U.S. Grant. Yep, that's it. So when you're looking at the U.S. Grant thing, John D had one, just turn your body and look that way. That would have been the other luxury hotel. Still standing. This was built for working people who are coming to San Diego. We're building like crazy. And to build the Pan Am exposition, this is the working man's hotel. It's still there today, a little off Broadway, kind of like down and outers. But you can go inside and still see that. Was he a philanthropist? He hated that word. He says, I'm not a Santa Claus nor a fool. The best charity you can give a man is work. And he said, now listen, 1 in 15 San Diegans in his era worked for one of his companies. So he fulfilled.
What date was this?
This would have been all the way to 1926. 1 in 15. Think of all the things he owned. Let's look at some of those. That's just in San Diego. President of all of those. So the lights, the water, the real estate, the railway, the trolley. I mean, somebody worked for, this was infrastructure of our city. And he was paying 10% of all property taxes. And when the unions came, that's such a juicy story about the unions and the vigilantes, because they tried to get Spreckels employees to unionize. You see how that went? Anybody play baseball or know about baseball? Has anybody heard the name Ted Williams?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good! I asked some people, going, who? Okay, wait. You people are in the know. MVP, Ted Williams. He's got a story in his biography. Now, nobody wrote this up in newspapers of the day. I had to learn this from reading Ted Williams' autobiography. Excuse me, biography. Ted Williams' mother was a Salvation Army worker. Down and out mom, wore the uniform, went down Broadway. You know how they claim with all this stuff? And Ted Williams and his brother, little brother, had to follow along like this, humiliated. He says in the biography, he says, he hated it. John D went right by John D's office building. John D one day says to his manager, "What's with the mother and the 2 boys?" Because he's a dad. You know, he says, what's this deal here with the boys, you know, with their heads down? Ted Williams and his brother found out they were in hard straits. That very afternoon, he paid off the mortgage to their house. When they left, when the Pan Am left, where do you think they took their animals? Oh, they left them in cages. Two brothers, the Wegeforth brothers, who were physicians for the Pan Am. John D's divorced daughter married one of the Wegeforth brothers. They were coming home one night and they heard the sorrowful wail of a lion left behind. He said, this is no good. We need to start a zoo, but first we need money, a society. Then, so that's why you heard the zoo that started with a roar in the night. That's the roar. So there's some cute stories in there. John D gave to the zoo. No, sir, no, man, there's no plaque to him in there. And one of my favorite stories in the book is not only did he fund Bell Park and the Zoological Society and the zoo and then bring the animals, blah, blah, blah. See that, one of the steamships? When our poor little zoo needed other animals to make it a world-class zoo, we had an exchange with New Zealand and Australia. So we sent over some coyotes and rattlesnakes, came back with koalas, kangaroos, wallabies. We came back with some cool stuff, right? The world, no one had ever seen a koala bear, by the way, until we came back on the steamship. But the stories of what those animals did to each other on the ship, because the shipping company thought it was a John D Speckels joke when he says, I'm sending up animals from the zoo, be prepared to take them on board. All those animals had both the passengers. Oh my gosh, that's a good story. Can you remember your license? What's your license plate on your car? You don't know? I don't know mine either, but John D's was 1. So in California, he's number 1.
Wow.
His 2 sons and daughters are 1, 2, 3, 4 in California because he helped develop the roads. There's his car, there he is in his car. And then his wife dies sadly in 24, but before that, remember the heir apparent I showed you?
Yeah.
Tragically, this guy's handsome guy gets killed in an automobile accident, rolls over, and they were doing some oil fields near Bakerfield. His mother and father never got over it, especially his mother, who she then died later, and this is Lily, his wife. And he had been grooming John D. Jr. since his birth to be his heir, to take over, to ensure his legacy would survive. Now, without this son, you think of it. But he always had this ship that would bring him comfort in all those losses. Well, look what happened to it. The Navy said, that's a cool ship, we'll take it. What, you're going to take this ship? Yeah, we're taking your yacht, and we're going to put torpedoes, machine guns, and it's going to war. It came back after, it's too much story here, but he received a settlement, but he didn't care anymore because his son had died, and he trashed his yacht. North Island was owned by John D Speckels. They'd already been squatting on his land that he paid taxes for all those years, squatting free of charge. They said, you know what, we like your yacht, we're going to take that too. We're taking North Island. More lawsuits, more lawsuits. It was seized. It was seized in the Condemnation Act. And then all the while, he's building that railroad. Because San Diegan's, remember how landlocked we were? But problem was, it was called the Impossible Railroad. It cost almost $19 million in that day. And people saying, stop, you're killing yourself. Quit putting so much money in this railroad. You just couldn't stop. Because by then, cars are coming out.
They have a nice museum out there, by the way.
They sure do. 100%. Go see this museum down in Campo. Fabulous. And guess who, when it actually get running, who drove the train down to downtown? There he is. I love that he is at the throttle and drove the train into San Diego. There's warships that were sending off booms, parades, and here he comes driving it in. So he came in 1999, he said, by hook or crook, because I promised San Diego, that's why. And there's the museum you alluded to. I brought back some of the Spreckels descendants for a reunion. And that's just
What
a
was
few
it going to?
Oh, it's so awesome, and you get to ride the train out there, it's fun. He had his enemies, that's all I'll say with this life. He had his enemies, and Edward Scripps was one of them. He hated John D. John D hated him. Oh. Now, what I discovered doing this book is the man was so shy. Not just, oh, I'm shy. He couldn't even address his employees at a Christmas party. His heart would beat, papers would shake. His son had one time quietly go and read, May we wish you a Merry Christmas, because he couldn't do it. He was good with small groups and a beer and a cigar. But standing up like I'm doing here, he could not do. So there's no speeches for anything he gave to San Diego. This brings Spreckels up and congratulate him. There's a few words by you, Mr. Spreckels. He'd go up like this. This is for San Diego. Then he'd run back to his seat. It's hysterical. But he did make one speech, and it was published in the paper. And obviously it's a long one, and I'm not going to go through it. But you can read, this is a little excerpt from my book. So it was a big deal that he read this thing. He never looked up from his paper, they said. And when the speech ended, after reading all these pages to get out of his heart and address every naysayer, hater from time immemorial, he said, tears filled his eyes. And tears, Ed Fletcher started saying that there was tears coming down his face. And he said, the reason I did all of this is because, gentlemen, I love San Diego. This is his last picture. He had lost his son, he had lost his wife. Sad, sad, sad.
In the organ.
Yep, the cave is the organ. That would have been on the HGTV. Couldn't tell, would it? And this is a newspaper proclaiming his death. And one of America's, he was eulogized in the paper as one of America's few great empire builders who turned a struggling bankrupt village into the beautiful and cosmopolitan city, San Diego. So that's where I got the name Empire Builder. I didn't have a name for the book until I read that at the end. I'm like, yay, I got my title! And then I had to fight for the title because the publisher hated it. Please! Unfinished business. That's still down there. He didn't quite get to finish this before his death. Thank you. Can I help anybody with any questions? Yes, sir?
How did you get interested in John Spreckels, and how long did it take you to research him?
Oh, have mercy on me. It was actually from a previous book I was writing in Hawaii. He's got quite the presence in archives in Hawaii. And of course, being born and raised in San Diego, John D Speckels, I know that name. I started compiling side research. And then I was asked to curate a museum exhibit for John D. And I'm like, okay, I know a little bit, I've learned some. I started putting these things on the wall right here. I'm going, oh man, this is like a book. And then it was a big museum exhibit back in 2017, I think, and then I needed artifacts for the museum, because no one just likes to read. You like to see those things back here, right, that the Rossies have put. So I began calling, yeah, are you a family member of John D? So I had family members, had one of 3 reunions I've had for those people. Anyway, I said, oh my gosh, I didn't think I was going to write another book, but this book just had to be written. How could he be so historically ignored? Oh my gosh, that's crazy. So that's why I just like, okay, I'm going to do it, and I love writing the book. Because I love the city.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
What ended up happening to the Oceanic Steamship Company?
Now, one thing that has really had people contact me a lot, the very last chapter of the book is an epilogue of sorts, and it's called Breaking Up the Empire. Every industry he's owned, I chronicled, even the Hotel Del, to every single owner the Hotel Del's ever had, to the pandemic, right? Even talks about the pandemic. So shipping everything is listed in here. That's my kind of gift to people. I think it's kind of complicated, all that to say. But you could email me and you don't have to buy the book. You can email me and I can send you a snippet.
So he was also in competition, I imagine, with Matson Navigation Company.
Madsen worked for the Spreckels Company. Yes, Madsen was a captain. In fact, Madsen, he wanted his first ship after his sister. Emma Claudina was his first ship. So maybe, I love that Hawaiian and Madsen era. I've got some of their original, their menus.
We have a set of menus.
Do you? I know, I need to frame mine too. If you find a good frame, let me know. Yes, sir.
How about the railroads? Is there two railroads in town? One from the east, one from the...
No, the east, his railroad was to go, start in San Diego, down by the Coronado Bridge. You start over down there. That's where it started. Went down, he got permission to go into Mexico, right? Every time you went into Mexico, by the way, you could crack open a beer during Prohibition because you're in Mexico. So people love to take the train just to, have a drink. And then as soon as they're going back to America, they had to put that drink away. And we went out to Arizona. It was and believe me, there's been a book written on the Impossible Railway if you're interested in it, because, oh my gosh, the things that happened, the floods, the trestles, the dynamiting, it's one of America's biggest engineering accomplishments was the building of that train, and it's America's most expensive train built in its time. He should have stopped, but he did not.
That's why you should go to the museum.
Yeah, and his heirs were bitter because he spent so much money they could have gotten, right? The Spreckels kids didn't marry wisely. They were a greedy bunch. You'll read. You'll read. Not very nice people they married.
There's an urban legend that Ted Williams hit the longest recorded home run ever. Because when he signed with the Padres right out of Hoover, that the train yards were right across Pacific Highway.
I didn't know that.
And because Lane Field was down at the corner of Harbor Drive and Broadway. And as a matter of fact, even today, there's still a home plate and a pathway out to where the pitcher's mound was.
That's so cool. You need to read his biography. It's really good. I'm not even a baseball person, and so I just read it to see where Spreckels is at. But I was very fascinated by his biography in San Diego. Really interesting.
But
anything?
As the legend goes, he hit a home run over the right field wall, and it landed in a boxcar. It was parked on the siding,
Wow.
and it first touched the ground in L.A.
That's legend what happened.
So that's the urban legend.
Yeah.
Ted Williams hit the 129.
That's awesome. Well, I'm sorry to have gone so long. I did not plan on it.
And then we go, have some other, other people will be coming in.
Yes, I apologize. Thank you so much for coming.